being groomed and geared towards maybe another position or improving the current position that you're in, where supervising, it's more of a performance review?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good one. Anybody else? What might be a difference between supervision and mentoring?
I would say that supervising is just making sure that your employee is kind of getting the work done, whereas mentoring is kind of helping them grow and maybe expanding their skill sets to be able to move on to the next best position or opportunity.
Right. Yes, I think that there's a lot in there, just like the other definitions. There's a lot in that definition, that in mentoring you work on growing, and in supervision, even as I see some are writing, that you're really looking at the position and are things getting done. So those are some good starts. I'm going to give just a little bit more information on kind of what mentoring is. And I love that word, grow. Mentoring is an investment. So when we think about mentoring, we're investing, choosing to invest our time and develop a relationship. At Allstate, one of the successful things we've had is speed mentoring. So even if it's a short time, you're doing something for a short period of time, you are taking a level of expertise. So there's an experienced person, and they're giving time and effort into helping grow the person who may be less experienced. And so sharing that wisdom and knowledge. It's also being able to have more of an interaction and inspiration, setting vision and clarity and support. So when we think about mentoring, again, if you take off your supervision hat, or if you think about somebody who was either a formal or informal mentor of yours, you want to think through the fact that they were inspiring. There's vision, there's a direction you're headed, or something you specifically wanted from them that you wanted to learn about. There's clarity in that relationship and support. When mentoring is not successful, they see that one or two of these areas is missing. For example, sometimes people join mentoring programs or enter a mentoring relationship, and they're not clear about what are the boundaries, what are the objectives, what will this mentoring look like? Will we meet in person or online? So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit later. But the one word I want to emphasize, whether you're the mentor or you're looking for mentor, is intentionality. You really want to be very purposeful about your objectives, your goals, and your outcomes. So you want to be clear to anyone you approach on what is the goal that you have, what are the outcomes, and what are the ways that you are looking for having some type of a relationship that you and the person that you're mentoring are clear about. Does that make sense for everyone, that you really want to be intentional rather than just call it a mentoring relationship that people aren't very clear? Any thoughts or questions? Okay, so the other part of that intentionality is you want to have a clear why. The last group that we talked to, we really stretched our thinking. We talked about what are some of the top leaders you admire the most in your company, and would any of you approach any of them for mentoring? And while some of you are across the country, you don't have to have your mentor in person. But the first thing we often do is we give ourselves a no, or we give ourselves a, oh, they're too busy, before we even ask the question. And I would say it's really important to think about what is the compelling reason you would want that person to mentor you? Is it just, wow, I admire you, can you mentor me? If you think about it, if somebody you were leading or that had a lower rank than you in your company, even if they weren't your direct report, and they walked up to you and said, can you mentor me? What might be some of the prohibiting factors with that? What might make it hard for you to say yes? Anybody?
If they're outside of your department, it's a bit of a conflict.
Okay, so for some it might feel different because it's outside of the department. Okay. Anybody else? If somebody walked up and said, can you mentor me? What might be some things that would give you pause? Would anyone
If you
feel,
don't,
go ahead.
if you don't know them and you don't know if it would be a good match, if you don't really know anything about them, that would give me pause.
Right. So some of it is you don't know anything about them. It might give you pause for that reason. Okay. And so with that, I think that, and I saw that somebody said a why me. So I think an important factor to consider is that that's why clarity is so important. That when we have clarity, we're able to really think through how do we, what is it we're asking for? So if someone instead walked up, I'm going to just pick on a name I see here. So if someone, I see Steve has done a lot of writing. So if somebody walked up and said, "Hi, Steve, I really admire the way you communicate to your team and to us. And I've watched how you've grown here and how your team members speak so highly about you. I just got a new position and I'd love to be able to have coffee with you and just talk through how you learned to communicate so effectively with your team." Whether you're Steve or in that example, what might be some of the things that would make that an easier yes or a clearer no? Anyone?
The individual highlighted exactly what they admired in Steve's communication, and they wanted him to give them pointers as to how to implement that in their process as part of their skill set.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
How often they expect to meet with you?
Right, so then it leads to some other questions. So I love that some of it is then by being clear, then it gets you interested to at least ask some other questions besides have an automatic no. So the big takeaway from this is whether you are seeking a mentor or wanting to mentor someone or someone approaches you, if you're seeking a mentor at your level, a mentor is going to be an even busier person, or even if they're not busier, they just have a lot of other priorities or invitations for tasks. And so if you think about being clear on the ask and the why, the other thing to be clear about is being flexible while also being specific. That making that ask, "Steve, I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you." Steve might say, "I don't drink coffee, but I know that I'm going to be walking between locations," or "I have, I think I saw you're going to X meeting. I might have time walking from my office." It at least begins to have a set of information that you can share and begin a relationship. You also want to be timely. So knowing that mentors are not for forever, you want to be clear. Can you all see the screen now? Can you see the information we're talking about? Hopefully. Okay, got it. Yes, thank you. Okay, so we're at the bottom there where it just talks about timely. That mentoring can be very specific. Like the mentoring I just asked for from Steve was, "Steve, I need this because I'm starting up with communicating with my team." So Steve also would not feel like he's locked into a relationship with me for forever and like, "Oh man, when is this going to happen? How long?" But I could say, "I'm asking for this specific thing and that I'd like to learn how to communicate like you communicate." So those are some of the really important pieces when you look at what is mentoring for yourself and looking for mentor, or when you're looking at mentoring others. Any questions? All right, we're going to move it along. Okay, so as far as a discussion, I know we're all over the place, but I'll just pick a quick question out of this. The whole point of this section here is to just think about the fact that somebody in your life has probably helped you get to where you are, and that's the importance of mentoring, as well as the fact that you can bring other people along, whether they're at your job, whether they're somewhere else, whether they're in a different company, but admire the work you do. So can a couple of you share, just you, what was the most value you've had out of a mentoring relationship, whether it was formal or informal? Just in kind of like 3 to 5 words, what did you find most helpful about your mentoring relationship?
It gave me confidence.
Confidence, great. And you can also feel free to type and I can read them. Anybody else? All right. Well, when you think about it, I know that for me, confidence is a big one. I've had and still have mentoring, and it sometimes gives clarity. I've had mentors help me know how to talk to certain crowds or how to write something coming from a professor background where we can be very prolific with words to moving towards a corporate communication where I need no more than 3 bullets or where I have to be very brief, that sometimes having mentoring for that can also be helpful. I also see that mentors have taught about being yourself and trusting your instinct as well as what it looks like to be transparent. And those are great. That sounds like having some really good mentors. We're going to move along, especially for the sake of time. Just some other things to think about in terms of the power of mentoring. We already kind of talked about it, and although the picture is about teens, what they found is that mentoring really does help relationships. I was just working with a group. Some of the work I do is with some of our affinity groups, and I was working with a group of Latina women who want to bring a mentoring program. And one of the ways I pushed back was I was like, well, you know, on paper in their shiny marketing brochure, they say this, but do you know that their program really works? And both of them were like, yes, we're products of the program. Within 90 days of starting out. So then it relationship. And in both cases, they talked about that first point, that it brought out a positive value in them. And as was said here, confidence or being yourself. And so if you're already at work and you're working really hard and you're just doing the next thing, and then all of a sudden you invest in yourself in a way that someone else gives you words about who you are in a way you haven't articulated before, or helps you see the value you bring to your team, then all of a sudden you're having a different conversation with your team or with your boss, or you're carrying yourself differently as a leader. And those are characteristics that have been proven to be very helpful. For the mentee, just the fact that someone is investing in you, and it helps increase those interpersonal skills. And what that means is, if you think of someone who's more entry level than you, they may not know, or they may be intimidated in what it looks like to be in a leadership meeting or to give a presentation to a group of leaders, something you may now take for granted. So being able to equip someone else, as it says there, it gives them higher success rates. And for a company growing like yours, it's also proven to keep people there. So if you want to attract talent, some people are really attracted to having programs like mentoring, or to know there's an option. But keeping people around, if you see a couple shining stars, even if they're not on your team, as long as it doesn't create some of the conflicts we heard suggested, if you see somebody who looks like, you know what, that person is an A-game person, then reaching out to them even to ask them, you know, I've noticed you come here, you're working really hard, I'd love to have a cup of coffee. That proverbial cup of coffee can really help a person stay. I'll just give another example. Is there was at an earlier time in my life a vice president that I had done some work with, and it was brief, but each time she couldn't attend these high level. Go ahead. There's a question. Yes, no? Okay. Every time she couldn't attend a high level lunch and learn, or one time it was Dell Technologies had a women in the workplace meeting, she would say, you know what, I can't go, and she would introduce me to her partners of these organizations and say, I'm unable to attend, but I've got this person who's doing fantastic work here at our company, and I'd love for her to go in my place. And so although she wasn't formally mentoring, I can definitely, and she was not even in my same track of work, because I know we've talked about this, the type of work she did, and that she was in technology and I was in human resources, just the fact that this woman noticed me and was investing in me, and then the what I learned being at these meetings with other vice presidents was so invaluable. So those are easy wins for some of you that, again, you may not have a long time to mentor someone, But if you see value in someone, what are easy wins you can do that would cause them to feel valuable and want to stay around? I see we have a question about a conflict of interest in mentoring individuals throughout the organization outside of your department. I think that would be something for you all to talk about. When we did this earlier on, I think late summer, that topic did not come up as something that would be prohibitive, but I don't work for you all. In most companies, if you're mentoring the person around their professional development, there is not a conflict of interest. If you all are doing certain things, I know there's certain organizations that maybe have competitive edges against each other where, you know, my equal in another department might see that I'm mentoring someone under them so that I can take ideas that department is cultivating and steal them. I could see that being a problem, and unfortunately there are certain companies that work that way. The majority of companies just see it that if you're investing in one of their own, that's just a value add no matter what. Where I've worked in companies where I coach, one of the things that we just recommend is that you have a relationship with the person you're mentoring with their manager, that you have that transparency to say, you know what, this is what I'm doing, these are the objectives we're working on, and add some extra value by saying, let me know if you see any improvements, or if you ever have something that you're seeing that you suggest that we kind of work on. That way everything is out in the open and there isn't really a conflict of interest. But I do want to pause because it's the second time it's come up, and just leave some room for seeing if in the work that you all are doing where you might see there being a conflict of interest to mentor someone from a different department. All right. Well, we'll move along. If it does come up, feel free to write it in. So I'm not going to go through this slide, but it just really highlights for everyone the fact that there are lots of different data points on why mentoring is important and in corporations. So you see that one of the bullet points, nearly twice as many people mentored business report, people who were mentored reported an increase in revenue than non-mentored counterparts. So I know your company doesn't have an outright mentoring program yet, but I do know that was something that people talked about once we talked through these statistics. If you can get an edge on some of the other companies by having this mentoring program, how beneficial would that be? Part of where they see that this increase in revenue comes from is, again, that one, it reduces your recidivism. When you've got your A-game people being invested in through higher level leaders, they want to stay. Those relationships excite them. The fact that someone notices them excites them. And then as leaders, you are able to start to have some strategic conversations around even if a person should jump departments in order to add more value to your company. So again, I'm seeing a question about how a manager might see a relationship, and it really depends on the transparency you bring. So if you notice someone and you, again, that clarity we talked about in the beginning, if someone approaches you or you see someone you'd like to mentor, I think it's great to have that conversation with the manager on clear objectives, that you're not there to talk about their work or, you know, their specific work goals. You're there to work on their communication skills, their relational skills, and their leadership development skills. And any manager that is a mature, healthy manager should thank you for taking up the time to invest in their employee. If there's something else to that conversation, please feel free to add to that. So again, this just gives a little bit more of why, and I've mentioned these already, but when you have mentoring, it's been proven that it reduces the turnover. When you onboard new employees, especially in companies like yours that are fast-paced pivot companies that are grabbing new people and getting top talent really quickly, you want to find a way to get top talent plugged in right away. Because if they do not feel plugged in right away, people leave. They'll go to the next place. So finding a way, and again, please hear that we're not saying long-term mentoring programs. You can have short-term programs for onboarding new employees where they get to meet a higher level leader. They get to ask questions that they may be shy to ask otherwise. And then they're able to feel more comfortable to sit there and actually get their work done in a way that fosters the environment that you want to cultivate so that they can have the growth that you're looking for. They also have seen that it saves time and you end up saving resources. And then there's education and learning. One of the companies I've worked with, they use their mentoring program to actually create culture. They're growing so fast that they're realizing they can't maintain their culture and their cultural norms. So they've used groups of people to do group mentoring and just in order to maintain culture. So to keep showing the values, keep having leaders show value. What's been beautiful about that particular example with that client is that they're using people who are frontline leaders. So they're not people who would typically be seen as leaders in the company, and they're really looking for an opportunity. And so when they're asked to do some group mentoring, they love it. They sit down and they create, like, what are the top 10 things we want to make sure people know about our company, our culture, and our values? And then they've let these frontline leaders develop what that looks like and how would they translate that to these relationships. And it's really worked out well. So if you're looking for a mentor, if you've had a mentor in the past, but now you realize that with your new work responsibilities and some of the things that you've been learning with Dr. Alicia and team, that you're at a space in your life where finding somebody who's a little smarter than you in terms of they may be on their A game or that you admire, this can be someone in your company or outside of your company. I think it's really important to think about how you can develop a relationship where you can learn from them. So as we talked about earlier, you'd want to clarify what you want out of that relationship. So before we go on, I would say just pause and think for yourself who, with the work you do now or where you'd like to be in 1 to 3 years, who is someone that you admire or that you think is doing what you would like to be doing well? Just think about that for a minute. You might want to write down their name or the characteristics. Now that you've thought of a person, I'm going to give a little bit of guidance through some of my own work. There's been times where I've looked for a mentor, not because when I was the CEO of a company for 13 years, I got to a place where I wasn't looking for a mentor on how to run my business, but I was looking for a mentor on how to, you know what, how is this possible? So I looked around and took these same bullets and I thought, well, who are, for me, at first it was, who are the women that I admire who have this, who are kicking butt in the work that they're doing, who I think do similar work to me, but they're also managing a family. And then I wrote out the people I wanted to reach out to, and I was very clear on what I was looking for. Because in fact, in one case, they were like, I come to you all the time for business advice. Why would you want anything from me? And I'm like, well, this isn't even exchange. I want to know better. How do you focus on your children? How do you even go about doing that development of deciding to have a family? And what does that look like? How do you prepare your team? And what do you have to get in order to be able to be a successful CEO and have a family? So hopefully that gives you some ideas that it's not always quote unquote strictly work related. Sometimes it's in that balance. If there's a part-time job, or if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, or if there's something in your personal life where you're looking at that personal and professional balance, you would want to look at what does that look like in someone else, and how could you go about securing a relationship with them where they could offer you some wisdom and some dialogue. So the types of things that you'd want to approach them with are just being clear on the types of topics you want to talk about. Like I said, for me, some people were shocked when it was like, I want to talk about how you manage family with your work. It was like, what? Because that's not a conversation we had ever had before. Time. Well, neither of us have much time, but I know we both kind of leave at 6 o'clock and we drive for 20 minutes. Do you have 20 minutes on your drive to have this conversation where we can touch base just, once a month? Format. This is, I already mentioned some of that format. This will be in the car, but you can say, I'd like it to be in writing, or I'd like to have some homework, or can you send me 3 articles, or can you send me suggestions on books, but really explaining to the person what or how you're looking to be mentored by them. The style and then the personality. Not everyone that you admire is going to match in personality well enough with you to have a mentoring relationship. So you want to gauge that. I will also say for the particular one I just gave that example of, I didn't only go to women. They were my go-to at first, but I also picked a couple men that I felt like had been pretty open about their family values and how they brought that to work and to their teams, and how they talked about, on Thursdays I leave at 3:30 because I coach my daughter or my son's soccer team. And I admired that. And so I wanted to have some conversations around what that looked like from a male perspective as well. So then you walk yourself through who will fit it and where might you be able to find a person like that. Are they in your company? Are they somewhere else? And then where you go from there. And then think about, what do you have to lose? So if you get a little shy, what do you have to lose? They can say no, and you're back to exactly where you are with new tools, or tools that you're being reminded of. Or a lot of times what I've found is people say not now, and I'm probably the worst at it. I get a lot of asks for mentoring, and so there's quite a few times I say, right now is just not the season for me to add. But if you think about it, or if it still comes up for you later, let me know. And I often will have people, one of the people that I have found that I have gained as much as I would say I've given in a mentor-mentee relationship was someone who pursued and kept being clear about what she was looking for, and her tenacity was attractive to me. I was like, wow, she's really clear on what she thinks I have to offer when I've said I really don't have time, or this is not what this looks like. And I've had so many amazing opportunities by having been open to that mentoring relationship, and it has changed over the years. So being clear in your articulation of what you're looking for not only helps in your ask, but it'll help you with the expectations you have of that person. I know we've said a lot so far. Are there any questions or comments that anyone wants to either ask out loud or write or type in? All right, I'll keep moving. So what does it look like to become a mentor? For those of you who haven't been a mentor, or even if you have, this may help you solidify what it looks like for you if you realize you're either overwhelmed or it hasn't been clear. Having a clear brand of what you have to offer. I just spoke to I was at an entrepreneurial conference this past weekend, and so I knew based on the topic and based on my experience that while I was giving the talk, by the end, there was going to be somebody who was going to, at least one person who was going to have that mentor question, like, can you be the one to talk to me? And I was going to say, not now, because I just don't have that bandwidth. But being able to be clear about the brand, for me, what I talked about is, this is who I am. This is in my coaching, this is what I can afford, or this is what I offer people. And then if there was someone who asked about my mentorship, I was very clear about what I have to offer right now. And right now, my focus for any mentoring is working with people for up to 3 times on just being able to be clear about where they want to be in the next 6 months and what it would take for them to get there. And then being able to work with them on who might be the person who could mentor them long-term for some of those goals. So just being able to be clear about what is the brand you're interested in offering to, whether it's your employees on site or different departments, same department, what is the brand? That, again, will make it easier to talk to those managers about if they are people at your workplace. If someone seeks you out, you want to clarify. You don't need to feel like you've got to answer someone on the spot. If they do come up to you or email you or in some way reach out to you about being a mentor meeting, you can say, I've got to check my schedule or let me think about it. And I really encourage you to be thoughtful. You wouldn't want to engage in a relationship that you're not sure about later. Ask others what they see in you and what you have to offer. So if you're wondering, okay, I'd like to delve into this mentoring thing. I'd love to see some people stay around on our team. Ask other people about what they think you have to offer. Even ask some of your team members. I have found that it is so valuable to ask those types of questions. I hope that some of you have asked that, but if you haven't, it's a really good question to ask, because it'll help you see what you have to offer. There's a lot of times where we don't realize how much we have to offer, and we feel too busy, or we feel like we just need all the mentoring in the world, and we're not in a place to give to anyone else, and others will give us that that clarity around what are the things they see us already being successful in. And then, who do you want in a mentee? If you are going to mentor, who is the type of person that would work best for you? I've noticed for myself, I really am better with innovative people. For example, that talk I gave on Saturday, one person was like, you know what, you said the best way we're successful is if we ask ourselves these same questions in 3, 6, and 12 months. Can you email me those questions in 3, 6, and 12 months and ask me how I'm doing? And I was very clear. I said, no, I'm giving you this talk. If you're interested in that, why don't you email me in 3, 6, and 12 months and let me know how you're doing? And that's just, again, me being clear about where I am, that I'm not going to, I'm not good at, and I quite frankly am not attracted to people who want me to kind of hold their hand and pull them along. Nothing wrong with that, and some of us are better at it than others. I love the go-getter, and I love just honing the skills of the go-getter into how they can do what they're doing even better. Have clear expectations and articulate them. In the past, I might have said something like, oh, you want me to email you guys? Sure, I'll email you guys in 3, 6, and 12 months. And then I get busy, and it's on me that I didn't email them about their success. And so being clear about, no, I don't have the bandwidth to add to my schedule to email you about your success. But if you take the time to email me, I'd be happy to respond. And as you see, that's to my bias, empower, don't spoon feed, that you want people to really feel like they are empowered, and as a mentor, you're not doing it all for them. Feel free to give articles and see if they're going to bother reading them or listening. As you see, I've included a YouTube video on some of the things that we're talking about. So you are a coach. One of you mentioned that mentoring is a lot like coaching. Make suggestions, and the outcome is not personal to you. You're not attached. If you are mentoring someone into going to grad school or into some other decision they're making, just know that your job is offering them ideas and wisdom, but what they choose to do with that is really on their own. That your success is their ability to repeat what you said, so that they know they have options and what those options are, but your job is not to be married to a specific outcome and feel like your success rides or dies on them doing exactly what you told them to do. So also be open to learning yourself. As I shared, one of the people that I've mentored more long-term, I've learned so much myself. People that we mentor tend to know more about technology or the newest, greatest things sometimes that us in our busyness get lost in, and can offer that to us. So I'm going to skip the YouTube video and move us along just into what mentoring is not. It's not an exercise in free labor. So this just means that if you find yourself being asked to do something that fits a job description, that's probably not a mentoring relationship, and you want to be clear about what you really can offer. It's not therapy. With Dr. Alicia and I both being therapists, that's just something that we would want that to be clear on. And what I mean by that is if somebody, every time you're mentoring them, the mentoring turns into a what's going wrong with their life, their marriage, their child-parent relationships, their love life, whatever, and you find yourself needing to give a lot of in-depth personal advice or listening, that might be a time to actually refer them to therapy, because a person may need some professional help in managing some of their past or some of the things going on in their present in order to even be able to fully live into some of the opportunities or the skill sets that you're trying to offer them. And then the other one that I want to highlight is it's not just a career booster. And what that means on both sides is some of the programs that I work in is that sometimes people sign up for mentoring and then they don't really either get mentored or they don't do the mentoring. And part of it is because it was great on their resume, but in living into it, they didn't really do that. So if you feel like someone is not utilizing your mentoring really well, you'd want to be clear with them, give them another chance to say, this is what I see our relationship looking like. If right now is not the time, then I'd like to be able to utilize my time with someone else at this time. But knowing how to move on from a relationship. So as we end so that we can have room for questions or discussion, here you have some things just to think about. And they're about you. What is it that you need to have a mentor or mentor for in this stage of your life? When you look at what you're doing, where you are in your work, where you are in this program partnered with Dr. Alicia, what is it that a mentor could help you with? What is one thing that having someone wiser or with some wisdom or with some contacts or networks or with just the ability to listen to you and help you sort something out, what would be that one thing you would want some mentoring on? And then what are you needing to do about being a mentor or improving your mentorship? So when you think about your own relationships, what would be something you would want to do about being a mentor? So if you are a mentor, how would you want to improve that relationship after some of the information we talked about? Or what would cause you to consider being a mentor at this point in order to give back and to create some of that longevity we talked about? So if you are interested in either improving the mentoring relationship you already have with a mentor or with a mentee, what would be 3 things that you would be willing to do to move forward in getting that mentor or improving your relationship with your mentor? Would it be clarifying your objectives? Would it be clarifying the construct of the relationship or a goal you actually want to work on? But think about what would be 3 things you want to make clear in the next month. And then who are you going to share this with? You all aren't in the same room. I can't even see you. So from an accountability perspective, it's great to have this talk, but it's only as good as we commit. So you can either put something out on the writing board on the chat, or you can reach out to someone and say, hey, this is what I'd like to commit to doing. I'd like to consider mentoring, or I'd like to see what it would look like to have a program here at our job. And then how will you measure your impact? It's really important in looking at, from an impact perspective, what difference does it make? So how would you check your progress? Would you check in with your mentee to say, what is it, what have you gained? What has been the top thing you've learned in the last month? But kind of ask yourself, how will you measure that impact? Your company would love to know that. Right now, in one of the companies I'm working with, we're tracking promotions, and we hadn't before, and we're looking that 50% of the people that we have had in even informal mentoring have gotten a promotion in the last year, and that's been an awesome statistic to see. And then last, how will you measure the impact of your mentoring? So just measuring that impact. I'm going to pause now and just see if there are thoughts or questions.
I have a question. I was going to type what is. I feel like there's a fine line between mentoring an individual and helping them, gain that skill set, that leveling up, within their professional growth and career. And then you have, I guess, sometimes a conflict where the individual, because they have seen certain things in you, they start mirroring something more of a, I don't know what others to say, but more of like they're trying to like clone you, like be like a mini you. And you have to just navigate through that. And I just wanted to know if you have advice around, how do you say, this is how I have been able to do this, but you have to find your own way of doing this to make it your own, to make it your signature, versus what your mentor is doing, if I'm explaining that correctly. Like, I feel like the intent here is to have that person be the best they can be, doing things the way they can do it versus doing it exactly how you're doing it, trying to get the same outcome.
Yeah, that's a great one. They do say the highest, that mimicry is the highest form of compliment, but it sounds like in your case that you're not seeing that them mimicking you completely is to their success. So I just have a follow-up question. Would that be that you're not seeing that as successful for them because then they don't have a way of making it their own?
Yes, I have seen it in the past, and I've dealt with it in different ways. So I'm more asking of how you would suggest dealing with it. I have highlighted the fact that I've noticed that it was more of a mimicking, and I kind of redirected and said, why don't we, here's different ways to do it. Find which way works best for you and make it your own versus doing it exactly how I would do it because you're wanting to get the exact outcome that I'm doing, if I'm explaining that correctly.
Sure, I'll just still push a little bit. So what if they did all that and they came back and they say, I find being exactly like you is the way, like it works for you, and every time I do it, it's what works. Is it more that it bothers you to see someone doing something like you, or is it that you didn't see the person being thoughtful?
It's a huge compliment. It's not that I am offended by it, but I just think that, we need to draw upon our own identities, and there is, everyone does things differently and sometimes come to the same outcome. So I want it to be that, okay, if this is your way, then this is your way. It may be identical to my way, but it has to be your own. I think that's my concern. I don't necessarily want mentoring to turn into cloning.
Oh, sure, absolutely not. So I'm just making sure I'm asking questions enough, because if someone does choose, if you feel like you're not forcing them to do something your way, but you realize all of a sudden the way you've done presentations or the way you interact with people, they're mimicking that. I think it's good to note it, but it's also important to ask questions like, have you found this successful? What does it look like for this to be your own? While knowing that then they really admired you. When you look at like successful speakers or comedians or most people in some industry, actors even, when you ask them how they got to where they were, they will tell you, well, there were these 3 people and I started watching every video, looking at what they did, and I just wanted to make sure that I lived into that. So I want to make sure that we're kind of balancing. You might just want to ask them more questions like, how are you finding this helpful? And also being able to tell them what you see in them, because maybe what you're seeing is some sense of falseness and not an authenticity. So maybe talking to them about what you see their strengths being and giving them some constructive feedback on how they can play into their own strengths rather than feel like they've got to be a mini you, which may not be sustainable.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I add something? Sorry. I was in a situation like that. And what helped me was my mentor sending me out for a day or 2 days with people that she admired and believed would give me perspective in order to triangulate on certain behaviors. So rather than mimicking my mentor, I was able to see other people performing a task at a high level, but in different ways. So rather than a conversation, essentially I was given time and freedom to go and explore and understand a little bit. And I think that I would do that if I had somebody that I thought was mimicking me too much. I would find people that I thought were on the level and have the person spend a little bit of time with them so that they could see the variety of experiences rather than just the way that I would perform tasks or the way that I would approach something.
Yeah, that's good. Any other thoughts or feedback around when you've got a mentee who's become a mini-me and not a blossoming person on their own? I see that we have another question around just having a large team. I think that the easiest way to answer that is just to, and I'm not sure if everyone was on when we first started, but the premise of this conversation is the difference between mentoring and supervision. So if you have 16 people on your team, I think that it's your obligation as their team leader to supervise all 16. But as a supervisor, I will also say, I will go as far as to say you're not obligated to mentor anybody on your team. You are obligated to give them the skill sets they need to do the work they need to do and to be such a great team leader that your team can grow. You can choose to mentor a couple people on your team as you have bandwidth, but it goes back to the slides we talked about. You want to be clear as to the difference of what are you offering them in your mentoring. That is not what supervision is. And why are you choosing those people? What are you choosing to mentor them around? How long are you doing that for? And what is the format of the mentoring and how is it different than supervision? Or you can choose to utilize your skill sets to find other people either outside of your team or outside of the company to mentor. Now we've got a couple minutes left. Other thoughts or questions, feedback about the concept of either becoming a mentor or getting a mentor?
Is it considered, or is it something you should think about as it relates to your mentor? I've had one for the majority of my career, and I have not changed that individual throughout my career. I have added additional mentors, but there's been one constant person. I guess my question is more, should your mentor grow with you and then you change different ones as your requirements for your professional growth and advancement changes, or is it possible to still draw upon that same mentor that started with you from the beginning?
That's a great question. And I think that really depends per individual and per relationship and the willingness of both parties. When I'm from St. Croix, Virgin Islands, and the day after I get there, since it's been a little while, I used to go there twice a year for up to 6 weeks. But the day after I get there, I will be seeing someone who was my kindergarten teacher, who then became my mentor in high school, and who every time I'm home, I still have as a mentor. So is that a lifetime one? Sure. And does she have things to offer me? Absolutely, because no matter how old I get, she's still older than me. And so there's always something developmentally that she can offer. But at this age and this space in my life, there's also things, she ran a nonprofit, I ran a nonprofit. So in different phases of life, there have been things she's been able to offer that are tremendous, knowing that much history about me. But I've also had mentors for seasons where, like I said, if I want to learn a specific thing or something from a specific person, then that's been for a season. But I think that it really depends on you. I would not cause anyone to think up front that you're joining a lifetime mentoring relationship, but see where it goes. If you both feel like you're adding value to each other, that could be a lifetime mentoring relationship. And so I think it really depends on you and on the person that is either being mentored or doing the mentoring. All right, I'm going to have Dr. Alicia join us again. Thank you all so much for your time and your great discussion. I see that there is a question about the slides being downloaded. I think there is a way that we can definitely have that accessibility. Dr. Alicia.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and we will go ahead and send those to you through the app. We had a problem, obviously, at the beginning with the computer hiccuping, so we have to switch computers, so we didn't have that up at the beginning. So we'll go ahead and send that to you, but thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again in February. We're having a critical conversation next year. All right, wonderful. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Do the same.
Thank you.
All right.